Okay, welcome everybody to our DataQuest Lunch and Learn today. The topic of our webinar is AP automation, and we're going to be inviting Mark Palumbo, an expert with Avid Xchange, to speak about this a little bit. So before I introduce Mark, I'll introduce myself. I'm Arlene Welty. I'm a principal with DataQuest. And we help clients make better business decisions by surfacing the right data in their Sage 300, Sage CRM, and Acumatica products. So one of the reasons we wanted to have this webinar was to introduce some of our clients to Avid Xchange in particular. The expected ROI of introducing AP automation really lies in the combination of technology and services that can accurately extract and capture invoice data that might have previously relied on manual entry. So instead of focusing on entry, we can use automated workflows to help people review and approve invoices from any location. And with Avid Xchange, you can also do that with mobile devices. So our agenda is to talk through the benefits of AP automation, and Mark is going to give us a product tour of Avid Xchange, and then we'll get into some Q&A. So Mark, I'm going to introduce you. Mark Palumbo is the Channel Alliance Manager with Avid Xchange, and in his role, he specializes in working with ERP reseller partners like DataQuest to help our clients streamline the accounts payable operations and create efficiencies through automation and best practices. So I'm going to stop my screen share and hand it over to Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Arlene. I really appreciate you and the DataQuest team taking the opportunity to share best practices around AP automation, as well as introducing Avid Xchange to your clientele. So today's topic of the webinar is going to be really 3 tips to improve your workday. So again, focusing on best practices around AP automation. And as Arlene mentioned, I'm a channel manager. I actually manage the reseller program at Avid Xchange. I've been doing cloud computing and technology sales for over 25 years. Arlene asked me previous to this call, am I technical? Well, I do have an MBA. I have a master's in technology management. So I feel I'm fairly technical, so I know enough to be dangerous. So feel free at in the Q&A if you have any technical questions. I'll do my best to answer them. Certainly, if I can't answer them, I will find the appropriate resource inside the company to address your question. So, 3 tips. So, number 1 is getting organized. What does that really mean in terms of AP automation? So it's kind of funny. I was actually at a recent partner event in California, literally just last week, and they had a panel discussion, and it was CFOs, controllers from some of the biggest movie production studios in the country. Warner Brothers was there, Spyglass Media, Madison Wells Media, and it was pretty fascinating for me to look at the entertainment industry, which we always think about the movies and the glam, the glitz. But really, at the end of the day, they're finance professionals, and they have to deal with the same things that everyone has to deal with in finance. And one of the speakers, the CFO of Madison Wells Media, she made this comment, which I thought was really fascinating, was, hey, I've been at many finance organizations, both small and large, but the number one thing that has stayed with me, regardless of the size of the company, is implementing internal controls. And those internal finance controls are standard, whether you're a $10 million company or a $100 million company. And so one of the first tips we'll talk about is, how do you implement internal controls that can scale and grow with the business? And then ideally, how do you communicate that to the internal and external stakeholders of the company? So by, narrowing this down to the AP automation space, it's really about, standardizing invoice and entry process. So I'll show you a picture in a bit. I joke with customers that have, just stacks and stacks of paper. And I'm like, hey, what's that? No, these are invoices I have to enter the system. Well, when do you do that? Oh, if I have time on the weekend, I'll do it, or I'll do it, Friday night before I leave or whatever. So it seems like, that's one of the last things on people's mind is, paying those bills, getting those invoices in the system. And, ideally, we want to help you take those invoices, get them processed and entered, coded into the system immediately within 24 to 40 hours, and then standardizing that process going forward. And I'll talk more about that, how Avid Xchange can help out with that. And the other piece of it is, so I was joking with Arlene earlier part through this call, was, vendor management is a big issue. People don't realize how difficult that can be. But, you have to get W-9s from vendors, validate their TIN numbers, OFAC screening. Are they a valid company? Are they doing something illegal that you don't know about? Have you done a background check on them? Do you have some inactive vendors that maybe you paid a bill to them 5 years ago and you've never done business with them since, or maybe they're out of business, right? How do you do all that vendor management? And so that's another area that we can potentially help customers out with. So our tip is really, don't procrastinate. Invoices come in, get it into the accounting system right away, get it coded, get it routed right away, do it every single day. Don't be this person here where you have just mountains of paper sitting on your desk that just keep piling up. We can help with that. As Arlene mentioned, in our minds, AP automation is both software that we run inside the cloud. It's innovative software. It's automating using AI technologies, et cetera, to help you route and approve those invoices. But at the same time, it's also people. We have a managed services component to our business, so we can actually help with the scanning of those invoices and getting them to the system for you to taking some of those manual labor tasks off your hands. So the second tip we'll offer you guys is prioritizing those duties. So again, here's just an example. Don't know what your rhythm is on AP, but it's kind of scary. We did a study with Paystream Advisors a while back, and they came back and said the average AP specialist spends about 2 to 4 hours a day on manual invoice processes. So these are things like, again, opening the mail, scanning and entering into the system. Some people like scanning in paper. I like scanning paper like I like shaking a can of soda up in my car. It's not a very fun thing to do. But some people like scanning, so that's part of the process. And so if you look at all these steps here, sometimes it's tough to prioritize because you've got other things that are important to the business that you want to be strategic from a finance perspective, yet you're stuck doing all these manual processes. So how do you prioritize that? And since we're in football season now, I can jokingly say, if you're on top of your game, right? If you're a pro NFL team, right? The best teams are good at what? They're good at blocking and tackling. Well, in finance, some of the blocking and tackling things we do are important to the business. So it's such things like not losing invoices and not having duplicate payments and maybe having fewer invoices to accrue. Being able to seamlessly reconcile your accounts and your GLs. And how about taking vacation or sick days? Do a lot for that? What happens when you're out of the office for a week or so, right? We have a really funny story here. So one of our customers called Acumatica, they're a real estate property management firm out of Atlanta. And CFO there is a great friend of the company. She's a great reference for us. She's spoken at previous events for us. She happened to be in Rome, Italy with her husband. They were in the Trevi Fountain Square area, and she had her Avid Xchange backpack, which she'd gotten from our user conference, and she had somebody take a picture, and she texted the picture to her salesperson, and the caption on the picture said, "Thank you, Avid Xchange. I'm in Rome, Italy, approving invoices on vacation." so it was a really great story. She's no longer, literally we've transformed her life. She's no longer tethered to a desk, no longer tethered to the office. She can be anywhere on the planet 24/7 approving invoices and payments. And that's kind of a really cool side benefit. So again, not worrying about taking vacation or sick days without getting behind is a big deal. And then again, if you have more free time in your day, imagine if you had 2 to 4 hours more back in your day, what other things could you be doing for the business? Could you be running cash analysis reports? Could you be looking at how the business can grow or acquire that new company that the CEO has been talking about, et cetera? What are the things that you can do to be strategic to the business versus reactive and looking backward to the business? So, our tip here is if you're still cutting paper checks, you can stop, or at least maybe not all of them, but hopefully a good chunk of them. I laugh because we have a lot of millennials now coming into the workforce, and and I've got a few in my household as well. I shouldn't say millennials, maybe just beyond the millennial gap there. But I don't think they've ever written a check in their life. They're used to paying their friends via Venmo, Square Cash, PayPal, all these electronic forms of payment. And then, these millennials will go into the workforce and they see these paper checks sitting on the printer, like, what the heck is that? And the baby boomer CFO is like, oh, those are the checks. I'm like, what's a check, right? And you have to explain what a check is. So it's just kind of comical that we're in this age of electronic payments, and yet we have still over 51% of small businesses still writing checks out there. So we'll talk about a better way. And that's really our third tip here is really, automating. So how can Avid Xchange and DataQuest help you to eliminate paper, help you reduce the number of manual tasks in your day, and ultimately give you more free time back in your day, enable you to actually leave at a decent hour so you're not staying overtime at night doing manual paperwork, or having to work weekends, or worrying about an audit that makes you work through the weekend, or again, as we mentioned earlier, being able to take vacation, or God forbid you get sick, right? So all these things, we want to help you give you more free time back in your day. The other thing that's really a side benefit, we hear this from customers over and over again. I'll talk about this later when I kind of show some screenshots of the solution, which is audit time comes around. How many people love audits, right? Nobody loves audits. They're painful. But with Avid Xchange, we can make that painful process a little simpler, because you can give read-only access to your auditor, so you never have to go through a metal gray filing cabinet dumpster diving for an invoice, because all of that invoice data and payment data is stored in the cloud securely, accessible to them anywhere on the planet. So your auditor could be in New York, your company could be in California, right? We really don't care. They can access your system, look at copies of invoices, copy of payments to their heart's content. Everything is date and time stamped in the system, and I'll show that to you a little later on. And then what's also nice is, let's say, again, the CEO is having heartburn over a $10,000 invoice that got approved and paid, and he wants to say, hey, who approved this and what was the process? Well, again, you can see the entire visibility for every invoice, who touched it. You can go back to CEO and say, yeah, Jim, you touched this invoice on May 3rd. Here's the transaction date where you electronically approved it, right? So all that visibility is in the system for everybody to see, all your stakeholders. I mentioned earlier about communicating information to stakeholders is really critical to the business. Again, whether you're a $10 million or smaller business or a $100 million company, communication is key to growing any business. And then what's really cool is not just having that visibility, on a computer system, but again, whether you're on a tablet, a mobile phone, as I mentioned earlier, with Acumatica Company, she was out in Rome, just literally approving invoices and payments on her mobile phone, not having to worry about being tethered to a laptop or taking away time from her vacation for those important critical invoices or payments that need to get taken care of right away. And then last but not least, this is really just a side effect of the cloud. It's not really a side effect of Avid Xchange. We happen to run on the Microsoft Azure platform, but you got Amazon Web Services, Google, other big platforms out there. Really automating and moving to the cloud is such a huge benefit, because it gives you kind of a default disaster recovery plan. I kind of laugh at companies today that say, oh, well, I feel more secure with my internal file servers and database servers and yada, yada, yada. I'm like, there is no way you're going to convince me that you're spending more money on security, compliance, and storage than Microsoft, Amazon, or Google. It's just not going to happen. So again, another tip might be, if you're looking at moving to the cloud, definitely do it sooner than later. There's just way too many benefits to helping the business. In fact, I think if I look at the finance industry, we're probably about 10 to 15 years behind. I know Arlene was joking with me before about Sage CRM, but a lot of the CRM solutions, customer service, Outlook, SharePoint, all these things have moved to the cloud. And now we're starting to see more and more finance systems moving to the cloud, and that really is the future of where finance is going. So I'm going to transition now from kind of tips about AP automation to specifically getting into the Avid Xchange solution. So here's a good slide. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. A good visual representation of what the entire AP process looks like today. So we affectionately call this the bubble slide. So everywhere you see a bubble here, invoice, opening mail, routing into PO, routing the mail internally, coding, approving, et cetera, are all functions of the AP process, all the way up to you're making a payment, you're filing invoice, and then you're doing research during audit time. Everywhere you see an X is a software or service component that Avid Xchange manages through our invoice or pay applications to, again, give you more free time back in your day, or to take some of those manual labor tasks off your hands and to automate them. The only thing that you guys will still be concerned with are kind of the strategic finance functions, which is coding and approving, posting a general ledger inside of the accounting system, which we feel are really things you can't automate. Those are things that you really need to have a finance professional working on. So not trying to put you out of a job, we're trying to make you guys more strategic to the business. The other cool thing is we have a lot of smart coding features built in. So it'll start to learn what your GL codes are, like what your plumbing codes are, or electrical codes, or whatever it is. It'll start learning over time. So even the coding process will become easier to do over time through Avid Xchange. So what does it look like in the system? So I'm going to date myself here a little bit. Arlene might remember this. I don't know if anybody else does, but there was a company called America Online years ago, and they used to have this funny saying, you've got mail, right? And you get mail, you get all excited, oh, I've got mail, and you go in and you click on your computer and you got mail, right? So in this case, we have a system that you've got invoices, right? I don't know if it's a play on AOL or a joke or what, but you'll get a notification. It could be, again, on your mobile phone, your tablet, your laptop, work computer, doesn't matter. And once you get that, you'll know that you have invoices that have come into our system. We actually have a PO lockbox facility where we'll train your suppliers for those paper invoices to have them send them to us, and we'll scan them in on your behalf. Or we'll train them to send their invoices via PDF or some other electronic file format via email. We'll create an Avid Xchange inbox for you. So we're indexing those electronic invoices as well. So whether they're coming in via snail mail or electronic mail, we'll get those, index them for you, and then you'll get a notification via email saying you've got invoices to approve. Once you click on that link, the screen that looks like the screen here in front of you pulls up. In this case, we've got, 6 invoices to approve. And this is a really interesting one because it's the Ministry of Magic. So if you're a Harry Potter fan, you'll notice that we have some Harry Potter fans at Avid Xchange as well. So no, the Ministry of Magic is not a real supplier. In any event, the point is you see all your invoices, and then let's say you want to look into detail onto one of those invoices. This case, it's City of Charlotte. We provide you the full detail on that invoice. The actual invoice is there that you can scroll into, look at all the details of the actual invoice if you forgot what it was. We provide all the header line and footer detail in the invoice screen here to your left, so you can see it's an invoice for $500. And then at the bottom, you've got these tabs which will help you work that invoice. In this case, we want to say, okay, what are the distributions for this invoice in terms of our GL accounting codes? Well, in this case, we're going to split it up 50% to GL0001 and GL0002, whatever those mean. It can be, again, something important to you in terms of numbers, or it could be, again, electrical, something else. You could name those accounting codes whatever you want. That's all customizable in the system when you guys set up. But the point is those distributions are there for you to amend and to basically approve to a particular GL code or post to a GL code. And then from an attachment perspective, let's say there's an issue with City of Charlotte. We either need to late pay this invoice, or there is a discrepancy on the amount, whatever it happens to be. And let's say in the case of a discrepancy, it should be for $400, not $500. And I have an email from a City of Charlotte representative that says the invoice is incorrect, it should be for $400. Well, for the auditing purposes, I want to attach that email to this specific invoice. I have an attachments tab here in Avid Xchange where I can attach that email to show that, hey, yeah, this invoice should be for $400, not for $500. So we're going to void this invoice out, and they're going to send a new one, whatever it is. And in fact, that next tab over, the comments tab, is where you can put that specific information. In this case, they say, hey, I changed the coding to reflect the updates in our system, but it can be whatever you want. You can add a number of comments to your heart's content. Whatever specific issues that you're having related to this invoice, if there are discrepancies or things you need to document for the auditors, you can simply put that into the attachments and comments field. So really, really great auditing feature there for you, and it kind of helps keep you honest, because I've seen a number of customers from really scary horror stories where I went into one office where they were showing us their invoice and their filing cabinets, and they had sticky notes on the invoices. And so, being the astute salesperson that I am, I said, hey, just out of curiosity, what happens when one of those sticky notes falls off the invoice? Well, I don't know. So don't be a victim of sticky notes. There is a better way. Automate that stuff so there's no discrepancy. Anyhow, Arlene asked a great question earlier about workflows. This is another great feature of Avid Xchange. You can customize workflows to your heart's content. So you can create a standard workflow process. In this case, you can see there's 3 steps. There's a review step from the AP clerk. There's a review code and approve step from the accounting manager. And then there's a final review and approve from the controller. And this is for invoices, under or including $5,000. Now, let's say the invoice is over $5,000 or over $10,000. You might have a 6-step approval process. Maybe the CEO has to approve it, or it has to go for a board approval, whatever it happens to be. You can create workflows to your heart's content, which is kind of cool. You can also create boomerang and ad hoc approvers. So let's say, Betsy goes on maternity leave for 3 months, and you've got a temp in there for 3 months. You want to add to the workflow approve process. You can put them in as an ad hoc approver with boomerang status, so when Betsy returns, she can take over that capability again. So the point is, a lot of flexibility here in the workflow approval process. We're trying to replicate your manual workflow approval process and automate it into an electronic workflow approval process. And then last but not least, as I mentioned earlier about, everything is date and timestamp. This is a really awesome feature for audits. Look at this here. So everything, every touch, whether it was an automated touch or an actual person touch, is documented in the system, and it's date and timestamp. So I can see that here, the invoice header was updated at 1/11/2019 at 11:31 a.m. in the morning, right? So do you have that kind of level of detail with your manual paper invoices? I would argue probably not. So the point is here, folks, this is a great way to keep you honest and really makes the auditors happy. I always laugh. I think I've talked to enough finance professionals. They say when you give the auditors too much information, they almost get disappointed because they've got nothing else to ask. When you give them too little information, that's when they start digging into more details, and your audit goes from a day to a week, right? So my advice is give the auditors more information than less. Okay, and then this is the last slide here, and then we'll go into the Q&A process. The Avid Pay network. So what is Avid Pay? Avid Pay is our ability to make payments electronically to your suppliers. The cool thing here is the Avid Pay network is now the largest B2B supplier network in the country. In fact, we have a number of very large banks that use us, like Fifth Third Bank and Key Bank. In fact, MasterCard has selected our payments network for 175 of their mid-tier banks through the MasterCard B2B payment network. And we recently just signed an agreement with SAP Concur, where they're now offering the solution through their payments network. So we're actually their payment network of choice as well. So a really great solution. And the reason for that is we have over 540,000 suppliers in our network today. And what that means for you is that there's a good chance that over 30% of your existing suppliers and vendors are already in our network. So one of the takeaways, I'll throw this out now, if you're interested, you can work with Arlene and the DataQuest team to ask what we call for a vendor spend analysis or a vendor match analysis. And it costs you nothing to do. Arlene will simply give you a template, or your consultant at DataQuest, a template to put all your vendor information into that. We'll run that through our network, and then we'll come back to you with how many of those suppliers in our network, and if you're eligible for what we call rebates, basically it's kind of like cashback rewards on a consumer card. On the number of suppliers that are already taking electronic payments from Avid Xchange, you might be eligible for rebates to actually help offset the cost of Avid Pay. So really cool solution. Happy to have a more detailed discussion with anyone in more detail if you're interested in learning more. So what does it look like? So the first thing you do is you create your payment batch file inside of the accounting system. And then instead of sending that payment file to the local check printer to print checks, you actually send it to the Avid Pay network. And that begins or kicks off a payment process inside our call center. So the first thing we do, we have what's called pay control. So everything that's been approved to pay, we then pull the money from your bank account. We put it into a third-party trust account. So we don't want to commingle those funds with Avid Xchange accounts, right? And that third-party trust account begins making payment to all of your suppliers based on how the supplier has told us they want to get paid. So for those vendors already in our network, we already know whether they want to get a virtual card payment, what we call Avid Pay Direct, which is an enhanced ACH payment, or whether they want to receive a check. And yes, we do still print checks. In fact, I think over 200,000 of the suppliers in our network still take checks from us. So we're one of the largest check printing companies in the country. But the goal is to eventually move them off checks to electronic forms of payment. But it's happening over time. And if they're not in our network, I'll kind of do a quick role play for you how it works out. Essentially, we'll call the vendor, say, hey, this is Mark Palumbo calling on behalf of DataQuest. DataQuest has just chosen Avid Xchange to be their payment supplier. I've got a check here in the amount of $1,200. I just want to verify your bill to remit to address. The supplier says, yes, that's me. Great, check's in the mail. For folks that are not in our network, we always send the first payment via check not to disrupt the AP process. So we want to be sure they get paid on time and there's no issues. However, the very next thing that we'll ask the supplier is, hey, I see you do a lot of business with DataQuest. Instead of getting a check via snail mail in the future, would you like to get paid faster? 80% of the time, because we have the data on this, the supplier will say, sure, tell me more. What does that mean? And then the very next question our call center person will educate them on is, hey, do you guys accept MasterCard and accepted form of payment? And if the supplier says yes, then they'll simply say, hey, instead of getting this check via snail mail, would it be okay to put this payment on your MasterCard account so you can get paid faster in the future. You can do that? Yes. Sign me up. And about 45% of the time, because again, we have the data on this too, the supplier will say yes, and they will move their account from getting paid via check to a virtual card on the MasterCard rails. Pretty cool stuff. If they don't have a virtual card account, or a MasterCard account, I should say, then we'll move over to an enhanced ACH or Avid Pay Direct system. And that's really it. It's really that simple. Again, we give your suppliers a choice of how they want to get paid. And of course, there's client reconciliation goes on. We have a whole payment supplier portal that's available for them, so they can actually check status of when invoice has been approved, when their payment can be expected, all that fun stuff. And I know I went pretty fast, covered a lot of information, but now I think we're open for questions. What do you think, Arlene?
Okay, let me check here. Okay, one of the questions that somebody submitted earlier, I think you already answered, which is, can I still print checks? Which I think our answer is yes, you can still print checks if you choose, right?
Yeah, and let me just clarify that. Yeah, so it's a great question. I know, Arlene, you and I talked about it earlier. So absolutely, you may have some strategic vendors or maybe personal, friends of the CEO or whatever it happens to be. The great thing about the Avid Pay Direct program or Avid Pay Network is that you can choose what percentage of your payments you send to Avid, which ones you still choose to write in-house. So absolutely, you can pick and choose which of those you send to the Avid Pay Network.
Okay. All right, we've got, will my invoice approval process have to change if I do this?
No, as I mentioned earlier with the workflow approval process, we try to replicate your process that you have in place today. So you work with the Avid Xchange project coordinator and implementers on our side, and of course DataQuest, to just say, hey, this is the approval process we have today. How do we replicate that in Avid Xchange? And we'll do our best to replicate that. And I would say 99+% of the time, we make it better than what it is today.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that makes sense for workflow. You and I had talked about the way it can either match what the customer's doing right now or possibly find a way to introduce efficiencies. So good. Okay. Other question. How do I add new vendors?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, the vendor file is still stored inside of the accounting system. So we look at your accounting system as the system of record. So we have a utility inside of Avid called Avid Sync. So what we'll do is, I think it's nightly, they'll sync that vendor file in your system with Avid Xchange. But again, it's another thing that you can work with the DataQuest team and Avid Xchange during implementation to just verify, hey, do you want that vendor sync to happen nightly, weekly, how often? We want to match the frequency with, however often you update your vendor file.
Is there a size of company that this works best for?
Yeah, it's another great question. Typically, in terms of, Arlene used the word efficiencies. In terms of efficiencies and ROI, we see that companies that are running anywhere between, I would say probably 150 to 250 invoices and, 100 to 150 payments a month is kind of that low-end cutoff. Where the efficiencies get really good is probably 300 to 500 in that range of invoice and payments. And if you're doing 500 to 1,000 or more monthly payments, then this is a no-brainer, because based on those rebate numbers I mentioned earlier, there's a good chance that those rebate numbers will potentially offset the entire cost of the Avid Pay program and probably put a good dent into your Avid invoice costs as well.
Cool. All right, I'm just going to give folks a chance if they want to add anything else. Okay. All right, so I think we're going to wrap. I'm going to put my screen back. So if folks would like to learn a little more about this, maybe do the vendor spend analysis with us, definitely get in touch. This is our general contact info, but I'll keep an eye on that. And Mark, thank you so much for presenting today, and thanks to our customers for taking a look.
Thank you as well, Arlene. Really appreciate it.